Welcome back, everybody. It's a public service announcement because we should have said something earlier, but if you didn't know, there's a cash bar out in the lobby where you can get soft drinks or hard drinks or Hal Bauer's special piñata cocktail that was designed for this event, which is based on one of the fruits in Horizons. So just in case you get parched and you need, oh, there it is. He's got one right there. I see he sampled it. A QA check has been done, so we're at the 11 o'clock hour. We can do that now. No better way to start a panel with Hugh Darley, right? Yeah. So I got to tell you a little bit about this guy real quick. Hugh and I had lunch last year. Johnny Rivers, if some of you were at our last year's event, Chef Johnny Rivers says, I'm going to bring my business partner, Hugh Darley, to lunch. You should meet him. We were about 10 minutes into lunch. I said, well, you got to be on stage for our next event because you got a lot of great stories to tell. So his whole biography is in your program. We called this one, There's No Place Like World Showcase, because that's where Hugh cut his teeth in Imagineering. But there is his little background there. WED Graphics, co-founder of iTech. Anybody ever do Star Trek The Experience in Las Vegas? I told him, and his current company is Idea. So his origin story, enjoy the graphic, was painting billboards, right?
It was. On Interstate 95 and 16 in Georgia, where I grew up.
So you were painting billboards all right, we got a Georgian here. Was painting billboards in Georgia, and you got a call, right?
I did.
To work at Disney, and they made you an offer you could refuse.
They could, and it's amazing. I watched The Wonderful World of Disney. I was 11 years old. I guess it was 1969 or so. And Walt Disney and Wathel Rogers were doing Making of Pirates of the Caribbean. Saw the show. I was like, that's for me. That's what I need to do. I went and told my parents. I said, I'm going to work for Imagineering. So I spent all my career, college, I double majored in building construction and industrial design, small schools, Georgia Southern, where I lived. And my dad comes out to where I'm painting a billboard. And my dad would never do that. And he says, hey, you got a letter here from Walt Disney Company. Well, I almost fell down that 70 feet, from the billboard to the ground to get down there and read it. And Becky Krasit sent me a letter and says, hey, we wanted to offer you an opportunity to come to work in Florida for WED at the time. So I did and did interview, walked through Lake Buena Vista, saw the construction site at EPCOT. I was blown away by that. So I go back home and I get a phone call, and it's Becky, and she goes, Hugh, we're going to offer you a job at WED. I said, great. And she says, well, it would start, like in 2 weeks, and it's going to be $19,000. And I was like, gosh, I make like $25,000 now. I said no. And I hung up the phone. The worst 5 minutes of my life was waiting on that phone to re-ring. I would have taken it for $10,000. I said, I just told the Walt Disney Company no. And that shows you, I wasn't really thinking, But yeah, sure enough, came down to Walt Disney World and started in WED here with graphics, and was assigned to EPCOT Center, the Canadian Pavilion and World Showcase.
I'm glad they called back.
Me too. Me too.
So you go to work at World Showcase, but not that World Showcase. No. It didn't look like that. It looked like that.
Yeah. These pictures they were just showing, I was amazed. I was 24 years old. I didn't know any better, but I assumed, well, I guess this is the way a big project gets done, and we're going to make it. I never questioned the fact that we were still walking around in mud, right. 6 months before we were supposed to open. But great opportunity. I was assigned to Canada, some of World Showcase, the Promenade. Somebody mentioned before about the parade towers and the lighting and all the special things that were happening around World Showcase. Well, I got to get involved in all of that stuff, and I'm sitting there, and I guess I can tell my Dick Nunes story now, can't I?
We're going to get that is coming up in a little bit, but okay, I can skip to it.
Well, so I go onto this site. I'm 24 years old. I'm assuming, well, I guess this is what we're supposed to, where we should be. So I started working on the areas. There was a guy named Al. He was our ADA guy.
All right.
I don't know if y'all
jump
know
back
Al,
there.
if anybody knows Al. But he rolled around in a wheelchair, and he was your ADA compliance guy. So if you saw Al coming, something was going to change. That meant he couldn't get somewhere, or he couldn't roll down a ramp, or the ramp was too steep. So we'd start making all of these little changes. And I noticed there was a guy in a golf cart that was always had all these drawings in the back of the golf cart. He was always coming around, and he yelled at everybody. I mean, he would just come up and just start yelling at people. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy's pretty tough. So one day I see him coming to me, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. So I was sitting there, and I'm moving a handicap ramp. Al was there, and we were talking, and I was moving the signs and the graphics, and it was parade towers had to move. And every time you did a change order, it was like $1,500. So you're really scared. You're this new kid working for the company. And every time you see this guy, and we still had clipboards. Everybody knows what a clipboard is? Well, we all had clipboards, and they would write down your name and that you made a change. And it was going to cost the company money, There was a Tishman guy there, and then there would be a union guy there, and then there'd be somebody from the operations, for Walt Disney World. And you'd have to you really felt, oh, I had to move this walkway. I had to move this sign. A parade tower was in the way. We had to rebuild rocks. All of a sudden, I'm getting real expensive. So this guy comes over, and he goes, what are you doing? I said, well, we had to move this ramp in Canada. It's the one that currently takes you down to the gardens. And so I had to move all this stuff. It was expensive. It was an expensive move. But there was Al sitting there in the wheelchair, and Al said, you got to move this. So we moved it, set it all up, and then he says, well, come over here. I want you to go with me. So I got in the golf cart, and I rode over to American Adventure, and we started moving some things around in the area development. And then the next day, he'd come and get me again, and we'd go somewhere to the UK pavilion, and we'd start changing things. So one day I walk into, somebody mentioned the Canadian Pavilion. That's where we ate every day because they had it set up in there for a buffet for the Imagineers and I think operations. So I go in there and I'm standing in line, and Bill Cohen, who was one of our landscape architects, walks up to me and he says, Hugh, how long have you been with the company? And I said, well, about a month. He's like, really? He goes, well, how do you know Dick Nunes so well? I said, I don't know Dick Nunes. And I was Sigma Chi in college, and he's a significant Sig, so I knew him through the fraternity. I knew he was president of the company, but I never expected to meet him. So I'm sitting there, and he goes, the guy in the golf cart that you're riding around with, that's Dick Nunes. And I said, wait a minute, I yell at him all the time. And he would yell back. So to this day, I'm still friends with Dick. I love it, but that was my Dick Nunes story. Everybody else was scared to death of him. I didn't even know who he was. So then I think yesterday, Tom Morris and some other people, we were talking, and we said, they thought I was a spy. Because I'd be sitting in my little cubicle over in the trailers back by the softball fields, which is where Wed's office was. And I'm sitting there, and the phone would ring, and it'd be Dick Nunes. And Dick would say, Hugh, you got to be at Polynesian in 15 minutes. Well, you grab your clip-on tie and find your name badge, because you didn't have your tie and your name badge. You didn't need to go meet Dick Nunes. He's fired people on the spot for not having a name tag. So I go over there and I go meet all my bosses. Everybody's like, you have breakfast with Dick Nunes every day? I said, no. And Ted Kroll said, I saw you in his office this morning. I said, well, he called me to ask me to go over there. When Dick called, you went. So my whole career when I worked at the Walt Disney Company, I was the spy for Dick Nunes working at Imagineering.
So I included this piece of artwork. It's from his book. It was done by, now we've had a debate back and forth how you pronounce the guy's name. The jury over there can tell me. Charles Boyer or Boyer, I think it's Boyer, who did art for Disney, painted this for Dick Nunes. It's in his book that just came out this past year. But the reason I included it, other than it fits right well with Hugh's story, is that the hard hat he's wearing, you'll see, says number 1. And what they did in the book is they airbrushed out the SOB that was underneath the number 1. So for those of you who think some of these biographies or autobiographies are the unfiltered story, there's the hard truths behind it. I'm going to hop back a bit here because Wathel Rogers, tell us about
Oh my gosh.
Wathel.
Well, the original show I saw, Wathel was hosting with Walt Disney. And I'm sorry, I would tear up when I said this, but he walks in my office one day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Wathel Rogers. And he was going to mentor me through some of this work I was doing here at Walt Disney World. So I sat for hours with Waithel, and it was just amazing. What an amazing inspiration he was. But for me to actually sit there as a kid and want to do this, and then have him come in, that was tears in my eyes. And I have one Waithel story. If you remember, he was working here. He left Walt Disney World. I took him to the airport, actually. He says, Hugh, I'm having an operation on Monday. It's a heart operation. I said, oh, wow, and I was talking, I was doing shooting gallery for Disneyland in Walt Disney World. And he was working on the model with me on some things. And unfortunately, he had a bad operation and did not fully recover. But I was in the model shop. I got the opportunity to work in one of the cubicles and around the EPCOT model, which was fabulous. And Waithel Rogers comes in with his nurse, his male nurse, and Waithel didn't remember people in the company, and people said, it was disappointing because he didn't have a good memory of certain things and everything. So he comes in, and we're demonstrating a walk-around little robot in the model shop. I wanted to go over and say something to him, but I'd already been told, maybe he wouldn't remember who you were or whatever. And as he's doing he was a great tinker, so he's making this little robot run around on the floor. And he goes, hey, Hugh, come over here and see this. Tears again. But what a great guy, great inspiration.
Waithel Rogers, fantastic. So with your riding around in cars with Dick Nunes, you also had the same kind of relationship with John Hench, right?
Oh, gosh.
Unfettered,
gosh. Oh, yeah. John, for any of y'all who ever had to work with him, I know all of us did, don't you get in a color conversation with John. Because he's going to tell you everything you've ever learned about color is wrong. And we'd walk around World Showcase, and he was doing the Imagination Pavilion one day, and I was with him, and we started talking about color, and then he was pretty critical of you, he would tell you whether he liked something or not. He'd worked in all these famous artist studios. He was the colorist for the movies, and, he was famous. So, you're walking around, he had his little ascot on. I think he's got it on in that little picture there. And you'd listen to him, he'd tell you about color, and then all of a sudden you'd find out you got to pick the colors for something. Man, that is a horror story for a designer to have to pick colors and go to John Hench to go get the approvals. And are you going to show on the big...
It's up next.
It's up next. So I'm assigned, we can't feed everybody at Epcot. It opens, and that's why I was here with Johnny Rivers, last year. But we had to serve people food that was not able to do. We had to build this Renaissance food facility. Does anybody remember the Renaissance food facility? Anybody?
So just so you know what you're looking at, that is what is today International Gateway.
Yeah.
That's the area where International
Gateway is. So we're between the UK and France. And we got to serve 1,000 people an hour in 30 days. This is a flat site. We have to order a big, huge tent. So I'm assigned the job with Lee Farr, who worked in entertainment. And we designed all the graphics for a Renaissance food festival. And that's what it was going to be, this big Renaissance food festival. So we designed all these beautiful graphics, all burgundy and gold and all these traditional, kind of like one of these Renaissance fairs. And I get a call one morning, and they say, Hugh, you got to go over to World Showcase. They're putting up the tent. And I was like, okay. And so I go over there, and the graphics were already there, and we were unloading the big signposts and all these great graphics. And I drive around to the back, about right here where this little road is here, and I notice it's a blue and white tent. We didn't order blue and white tent. We ordered a gold and white tent. So it looked Renaissance. I'm like, what's the blue and white tent here for? Oh, well, they were out of them. Now, we've done $1 million worth of graphics to go around the Renaissance Food Festival, and look at that. I was in shock. And they said, John Hench is on the promenade he wants to talk to. I'm like, wow, this is not going to be a good meeting. So I go wandering through there, and I see everybody standing there. Everybody's kind of grinning because they see me coming. And I go there. I said, John. He goes, Hugh. He goes, this is your design? I said, well, no, not really. But he wouldn't let me finish. And he goes, this is a quote. This is a great quote. He goes, Hugh, you have reached a new high in Disney low. And Bob Smith has the car keys, and he gives them to me. He says, John needs a ride to the airport. You go with him. So I had to drive John to the airport. Tried my best to explain to him. He didn't want to know nothing about it. It was a blue and white tent, and I had all these great graphics out there. But so I've always been known as the guy that reached a new high in Disney Loves.
In Disney Loves. Schooled by John Hench. And just in case you were wondering, at the Renaissance Food Fair, you could eat Renaissance food like bratwurst, corned beef, lasagna, or a nice change from fast food hot dogs and hamburgers.
It's funny you found that photo, though, because they destroyed all photo records of that place because of how bad it was.
I owe it to Michael Crawford back there because I said, I know we have one, but I can't find it. And Michael gave that one to me. So you got in trouble for hanging a banner.
I got into trouble for hanging a lot of banners. Well, what happened was when we were working, and y'all saw those pictures up there. Well, see, we had a union contractor. We had Tishman managing that. We had Walt Disney Operations that were managing supposedly everybody. And we were wed. And we weren't supposed to touch anything. You couldn't move a ladder. Like if you saw a ladder was in your way, you couldn't move the ladder because one of the union guys had to come move the ladder. One of the Teamsters had to move the ladder. Or if there was a wrench laying on the floor and you were walking over it for 2 or 3 hours, no, you had to wait on somebody to come in. Don't you get caught with a tool in your hand, because that's going to be a grievance, and they're going to fight. And I had a lot of grievances against me. So the night before opening, we had been hanging the day before. We'd been hanging the parade banners around World Showcase. And we got to the end of the day, and it seems like the union guys got off at 3 or 3:30, and we were always there. The Disney people were always there later, like till midnight. So I noticed there's 48 banners, poles that aren't finished on the pavilion. And we'll say, well, I know where the banners are. All the union guys, they're gone. So I got Pete Rahill, a guy that works at APO, I think, and I said, Pete, we got to hang these banners before in the morning. And I mean, we're laying grass, we're painting railings. I mean, this is like 12 hours before the opening. So these guys had put up about, 100 banners that day, and they were 48 short. Well, they were all in the back of a pickup truck. So Pete and I went and got the pickup truck. We came over. We had the ladder and the tools. We put up 48 banners on the pavilion there. I didn't think anything about it. We opened, everything was successful. Then I get this legal letter from the legal department. I said, you got these grievances against you. You hung 48 banners out at EPCOT Center. I said, no, I didn't. Pete Rahill's in there. He says, no, we didn't do that. But we did, and we got them up. We did 48 in about 3 hours.
So tell us about these trees.
Oh, gosh. I don't know. There's probably better people here that know more about it, about the trees. But they built these huge artificial sequoia trees. And I mean, I remember millions of dollars being
for the Canada Pavilion.
For the Canada Pavilion. They're not there now. Y'all know that, right? And I was like, these look awful out of scale. And somebody else, I guess, made that decision, because I came back the next day and they were gone. I'm like, what happened to them? They're in the landfill. So we've got a couple of big, huge sequoia trees somewhere here on the properties in some landfill. But it was just one of those things we were talking about, the model making. Somebody made the model, it looked good on the model, but when you got it out to the site, it didn't work.
It didn't work. Yeah. All right, this is a quick one. Yeah, we got some people who know what it is. In that original hardcover EPCOT book, which somebody probably has in the audience and can wave around. There it is, right over here. Brian's got it. In the aerial shots of the pavilions, over the UK pavilion is this aerial shot, and if you zoom in, you could see Boo Ivy. Boo is a mama's boy. And for years, us fans would look at it and say, what is that? So when Hugh told me he worked at World Showcase at lunch last year, I said, by the way, do you know anything about this? And I mentioned it to him. And Michael Crawford had asked dozens of people over the years about this. He was the first one that goes, him and Johnny Rivers both go, well, I remember Boo. You do?
Yeah, and Bob, which was his first name, Booz, I think, was his full name. He was our landscape architect, worked for us in the buildings here. And what happened was there was a lot of conflict between the union, the Disney, the ops, the designers, everybody, is coming in and out all the time in these pavilions. And sometimes they would move things for convenience. The union and Tishman and those guys would say, well, we don't want this here because of this, this, and this. Well, it got to be old after a while because you kept using the same excuses. And then Bob Booz, I think, and this is my recollection, Bob wouldn't move things to make it convenient for them because he was always telling them, well, no, because of this person or this person. So I believe this was painted by the union guys when he wouldn't allow them to move trees in the pavilion. They said, well, Booz is a mama's boy because he wouldn't do any of the work they wanted him to do on their behalf. And that's the best story I know about that.
There you go.
And I don't know how we got the picture because I never saw the picture. We don't have drones like we do now. So that was a big event when the helicopters flying around. People were doing all kind of things.
They must have known the helicopter was going.
They must have known the helicopter was coming, and they did it.
So there's a couple pictures here. Tell me about these.
Well, that is a very young Hugh Darley. That is a picture they took of me in the shooting gallery that we did, and there's a couple of interesting stories about this. I started on the shooting gallery in '82, and Michael Jackson used to come by the offices now and then. He was here a lot during that period of time. But right there, you'll see right next to me, there's a bottle on the top of that tombstone. Mm-hmm. And there's a skeleton hand that comes up reaching for we have a little saying on there about somebody's reaching for the bottle on the top. Michael told me at his ranch one day, I worked for him years later, and he told me that inspired him to do Thriller.
Oh, really?
But I'm still waiting on the check.
That's it. You should. There's one more.
Oh, and that was in the model shops. What a fantastic opportunity. The shooting gallery was a project nobody really wanted to do. Show designers wanted to do big things, big pavilions and all this. And I kept seeing this project always on the pending list. We had to change it out by a certain date because it was real lead. You shot real lead at all the little figurines. And there was some OSHA thing. We had to change it by a certain date. So I picked it up and I said, I want to do it. And everybody was like, you want to do that little show? And I said, yeah. And I built the model, the full-scale model, which was great, and all the rock work. I learned how to do rock work with T.A. Strouser, who was great, by the way. He was show quality here at Walt Disney World. But you get to learn everything about a major show. I knew audio, lighting, special effects, rock building, rock work, show control systems. I got to work in DAX. And on this show, they flew me to Tokyo to go meet with Sony. And I guess there's no legal people in here, but we went there and they gave me a box, compact disc player. And they asked me to put it in my suitcase and take it to Walt Disney World. I said, okay. You know how those people stop you at TSA and they go, did anybody give you anything to take on this plane? No. You go, no. So I smuggled the first Sony compact disc player in the United States. Yeah.
I think the statute of limitations has probably expired.
So. And I'm still waiting on that check.
That's it.
But we got to build and we transferred everything into digital. So that began the digital. I have number 3 disc, which I still do have that they gave me, and that's a treasured item of mine, the 3rd compact disc ever made in the world.
There you go. All right. Now, I am glad Kim Murphy is here, who worked on the Living Seas Pavilion. Because Hugh told me this story a couple of months ago when we were prepping for this, and I said, I'm absolutely ending the panel with this story because it's one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Yep.
So, proceed.
Well, I was asked to be the art director on the fountain out front, unlike the fountain that we just talked about. But the idea was that it was going to have a wave generator in it, these wave cannons that would simulate a natural wave. Every 7th wave, would come through the thing. So we're working with all the guys that are now Wet Enterprises, I think, Alan and Mark, and Rock Hall and Monty Lundy were art directing the splash pool. They were down underneath the rocks. So as we're sculpting the rocks there, they came and said, we got to do a water test. And you've heard several people talk about it. We had people working just on, so there were so many hours you could work on it, and then somebody else got to work on it. And you see the little mural back there in the background was being painted. They came in and said, we need to do a water test. We need to fire the cannons off real quick. And we're like, okay, so everybody gets out of the way. We put some plastic over some of the wire frame that wasn't finished and everything. And they said, we're going to load the cannons and we're going to test the cannons. And Monty Hall and Monty are there, and they're telling us, okay, everybody stand back. So we got, back from everything, and they go, so we're going to load the water cannons, and we're going to test it. And I remember Monty asking, how many pounds of pressure should we try to put on? And I thought, oh, gosh, this is not going to be good. So everybody's back away from it, and the guys are on the scaffolding over there painting the mural. It's probably 30 guys over there on the scaffolding. And it's 300 feet away. So we didn't tell them to stop or they need to get out of the way or anything. So they go down there and they decide they're going to put 100 pounds of pressure in these water cannons. And these water cannons, some of them were 18, 24 inches, but they were to make this wave come out. So they set it off, and it sounded like an atomic bomb. The water went all the way over to that mural and knocked all the guys off the scaffolding. And the paint's just running down the mural like this. So Monty and Rock come running out of the pit underneath the thing and said, what happened? It had ripped all the plastic off of the rock work and threw it all over in the entry ramp. And I said to them, I think it was too much pressure. Being the technical guy that I was, I could tell that was too much pressure. But it ended up being about 8 pounds that made the wave work.
Was that worth it or what?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And what a pleasure to be here and meet all of y'all and get to listen to the stories, because the stories are endless. You can sit up here for hours.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll have you back sometime.
Sounds good.
Thank you,
y'all.
everybody. Thank you, Hugh Darley.
Thanks.